This is the Cliff Notes to the review of the Middle Fork Weezer River Draft EIS. As a quick reminder, the PFC has a swim lane diagram that defines the business process. We are in the phase where we are reviewing the draft EIS in order to submit a letter to the Forest Service to provide comments prior to the draft record of decision. What are some example comment? Here are some example comment letters that could be produced at the end of the review. One is Alternative 2 is consistent with the recommendations and the PFC supports the actions and treatments within that alternative. Or another, PFC supports improving upon Alternative 2 by including some additional treatments within that alternative. Or PFC supports Alternative X as the selected alternative in preference to the proposed action. Or more of the smorgasbord recommendation like we had for LCBC, pick actions from number 2, from number 3, and number 4. How do we get there to the point where we can submit a comment letter? The structure that I'm using in this presentation is we compare objectives from the DEIS, the draft EIS versus the Coalition's recommendations adopted over a year ago, review the environmental effects, and then rank alternatives by the 5 PFC goals. I'm going to use the recommendations document format to organize the Cliff Notes. Remember that the recommendations were broken into vegetation, road and recreation infrastructure, and economics. And each of those sections deals with portions of the PFC goals. Vegetation addresses both wildlife habitat and wildfire management. It also does have some impacts on economics. Road and recreation infrastructure addresses watershed health goals and access and recreation. And economics addresses the fiscally responsible projects that contribute to the local community. So let's begin with vegetation. Priority 1 from the PFC recommendations were to implement treatments that retain or enhance the large tree size class. For wildlife, this primarily was directed at wildlife family 1 benefits. In the recommendations, the treatments focused on commercial thin, free thin in PVGs 1, 2, and 5. And also in PVG 6, what we referred to as the dry portion of potential vegetation group 6 with several species present. The bar chart on the right has the alternatives and the PFC objective. At the top, 1,852 acres. And you can see alternatives 2, 3, and 4 vary from 2,158 acres to 2,234. All 3 of these action alternatives were somewhat higher than the PFC objective. And I think this is primarily based on the fact that the objective for the PFC used an estimate of 1,000 acres from the experience of Lost Creek, Boulder Creek. And from the draft EIS, it appears that there were additional acres in PVG6 that have several species present. Priority 2 under vegetation for the coalition was to accelerate the progression from medium to large tree size class stands. There was a great deal of discussion about natural stands versus plantations, and natural stands were viewed as the higher priority. Again, these actions would, in terms of wildlife, provide family 1 benefit. And the 2 major treatments in the recommendations were commercial thin, free thin, and commercial thin mature plantations. The targeted potential vegetation groups were 1, 2, and 5. You'll notice in the bar chart that the PFC objective was 2,185 acres. It's significantly higher than all 3 alternatives. They each have 715 acres. I believe this difference is primarily due to the treatment in the draft EIS called burned area and plantations. And this was a treatment targeting restoration needs primarily in areas impacted by the Grays Creek fire. Vegetation also involves the goal of wildfire management and the goal of returning fire to the landscape. Although the coalition didn't have a objective metric, I think the draft EIS provides a reasonable one, and that is the movement of acres, the percent of acres towards historical fire regime. Both the harvest and prescribed burns influence this outcome, and the bar chart shows the weighted average across all the fire regimes within the project area. And alternative 2, 65% of the acres would make a transition towards the historical fire regime. Alternative 3, that metric is 49%, and alternative 4 comes out at the top with 74%. The second section of the recommendations document is the road and recreation infrastructure. One of the objectives in this section from the PFC dealt with watershed health priorities. At the top of the list for the sixth level watershed priority was the Granite Creek watershed, and the second priority was Mica. And the recommendations identified 4 indicators that should be improved from a current category of poor. These indicators included aquatic habitat, roads, trails, and sediment related to roads and trails, and soils in general. And recall that the PFC discussed they preferred to use GRAPE as a method to estimate the reduction in sediment delivery to streams from roads rather than relying on road density by itself. In this case, the bar chart shows the reduction in sediment delivery estimated for the 2 priority watersheds, Granite and Mica. The reduction for the Mica Creek watershed is fairly similar between the alternatives. For the case of the Granite Creek watershed, it ranges from a 36% reduction to a 48% reduction in alternative 3. The draft EIS also includes an estimate of the stream miles that will be improved as a result of the treatments and actions under each of the alternatives. This is summarized in the bar chart again for the 2 priority watersheds, Granite and Mica. Although they're fairly similar, alternative 3 is higher than 2 and 4 for Granite Creek. And in Mica Creek, alternatives 2 and 4 are identical, and alternative 3 is higher, 8.7 stream miles improved compared to 7.9. The recreation opportunity spectrum was also a concept that the coalition discussed, and the recommendation was to maintain the current spectrum of opportunities within the project area. The draft EIS does state that the project-related proposals would not alter either the winter or the spring recreation opportunity spectrum, with one disclaimer that mechanical treatments could have some temporary impacts during the winter. Access is an important resource issue for many of the coalition members, and these 2 bar charts are summarizing the conditions under each of the alternatives, and in this case each bar chart is also including the current condition, alternative 1. The first on the left is an estimate of the open system, that is the open forest system roads and the county roads in miles. The current condition is 100 miles. Alternative 4 would result in 98.8 miles, alternative 3, 96.1, and alternative 2, 98.6 miles. The bar chart on the right is addressing the access to those acres that have a management prescription category of suitable for timber, and the bar charts are showing the chart shows the percent change in acres that are accessible within a quarter mile of a system road. So for the no action alternative 1, there is no change, of course. For 2, the percent change is 7.1. Alternative 3 decreases those acres by 12%, and alternative 4 by just under 2%. In this slide, I think the main point here is to address a question that was raised when the coalition reviewed the proposed action in November and December of 2014. And the issue was whether or not extending or enhancing some of the trails would also put at risk existing elk security areas. So on the left, the bar chart is summarizing the miles of trails that are suitable for ATV and OHV, but they're also accessible by all vehicles. Alternative 1, the existing condition is 2.4 miles. Under Alternative 2, this would increase to 8.8, and that's the same as Alternative 4, 8.8 miles. And in Alternative 3, it is 5.8 miles. Then on the right, the elk security areas, existing acres under the current condition of the no action alternative is 1,278 acres. That would be reduced under alternatives 2 and 4 to 858 acres, and also reduced under alternative 3, but to 1,140 acres, or approximately 140 acre reduction compared to the current condition. So I think this is a topic that will be of interest for discussion at the February meeting. The economics section had 3 objectives. One was dealing with jobs, asking for an estimate of jobs and also the change in income, annual income, as a result of the project. On the left, the draft EIS estimates the jobs resulting from each of the alternatives ranges from 41 to 50 jobs each year. And on the right, the income that corresponds to those jobs would range from $1,443,000 to $1.7 million. The coalition had a third objective, and that dealt with the contribution of forest products to the total cost. And the coalition recommended 22%, and that the source of that was the original 2011 proposal, CFLRP proposal. Alternative 4 exceeds that objective with 23.3%. Alternative 2 is a close second with 19%, and Alternative 3 comes in third at 6.2%. So putting that comparison of the objectives from the draft EIS and the PFC recommendations to work, this is my interpretation at this point, before discussions, of the relative ranking of each alternative with respect to the PFC goals, the 5 goals. I think what's important to look for is whether or not there are any 3s underneath the proposed action. If there are there ways to improve it? The other is to look at the other 2 alternatives and see if there are any ranks that are greater than Alternative 2. And if so, the question is, are there actions that can be incorporated into Alternative 2 that would improve or enhance the outcomes in terms of restoration? By using this structure, I think we can focus discussion at the February meeting and make progress towards developing a series of comments for a comment letter that we will submit to the Forest Service before their March closure of the comment period.